Hello and welcome to Shaka Extra Time. I am Paul Ndiho. Joining me from his home is Shaka Sali himself, aka the Kabale Kid. Hello, Shaka.
Hello, Paul.
How are you?
I remain simple, easy, and as some of my fans have suggested, an awesome son of Africa.
Shaka, let's start here in the United States. Let's start maybe in Minneapolis, where a black man, George Floyd, was killed by police. The man was heard on camera pleading for his life, saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And these cops didn't care. Should a black person really be killed just for $20, counterfeit of $20? Shaka.
You know, Paul, first of all, sincerely, it's not just a black man. Any man, any woman, any human being, nobody, at least in my view, should lose his life simply because he was found with a counterfeit, not only of $20, even if it was $1 million.
I mean, you're absolutely right. When you see the images, I think to some extent people are justified to not express that anger. I think there has to be a better way. The police is trained to restrain in such circumstances, to be able to do the right thing. But in this particular case, I don't think the police there did the right thing.
I honestly think that I couldn't agree with you more, Paul, but I frankly cannot even find the appropriate adjective to describe the behavior of that police in Minneapolis. We could talk about overreacting. We could talk about so many different beautiful English words, but sincerely, to be honest with you, and I'm saying this from the deepest, better part of the bottom of my Cavalry heart and soul, I cannot find any appropriate word with which to express the kind of disgust that the police in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the kind of behavior that it really expressed. Mind you, it's not only that eventually George was killed, but
he put his knee on him. The guy really...
The knee.
Yes.
He put his knee on him for at least 5 minutes.
Correct, yeah.
Can you imagine? And then when people came around gathering, and I think they were sort of protesting, as of course is supposed to be the case, especially because their constitution allows them to do so. The police used not only tear gas, but also rubber bullets against them.
You see, I have a lot of respect for police here. In some cases, they're dealing with a very fluid situations. They have to protect themselves. It reminds me of an incident where I was personally involved, where I had to go and cover a story in San Diego, California. What happened was a Ugandan young man, Alfred Olango, was having some mental issues. He had spent a night at his sister's place. The sister called for help, saying that my brother is in distress, he's so distraught, I need some help. So the brother stormed out of the apartment and started running on the street, wandering on the streets. The sister came right behind him, running after him. And as she's talking to police, she was on the phone for over an hour with the police, 911, calling different. They would hang up, she would call again. Police arrives there. Within 3 seconds of police arriving at the scene where that young Ugandan man was, they opened fire. I mean,
Did they ask any questions?
No, I mean, they told him to, to stop, and because the guy was distraught, he couldn't understand their instructions.
Right.
So, unfortunately for him, he had a vape pipe. Right. So he pulled it out of his pocket. What the cops looked at, it looked like a gun. I mean, when you see it, it looked like a gun.
But
And
did they talk to the sister who had in fact called them?
the sister was standing right there when they shot him.
And they couldn't talk with his sister.
The sister was saying that my brother is distraught. My brother needs help. I called for you guys to come and help me to take him to the hospital.
They couldn't listen.
They couldn't listen.
You know, Paul, I listened to so many different types of analysis yesterday on American different channels of television. And there is one very interesting analysis that came about. And one of these pundits was actually saying, yes, the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. may have had a dream, especially when he said that his dream was that one day he hoped that his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Unfortunately, that particular analyst said that for Martin Luther King's words, which were incredibly meaningful, that dream, as far as that particular pundit was concerned, still remains really a dream. Because she actually said that, you know, when you look at the manner in which the police deal with black people, when you look at the behavior, it is as if they think that they are citizens, and in which case they have actually constitutional rights of the United States of America, and that the people they are dealing with who happen to be black are not citizens. They are subjects who have absolutely no constitutional rights, but have actually privileges which should be granted to them by the police. And she even went further and said, by in fact, the people she characterized as ignorant, and some would say racist, white people.
I think you just touched something that even resonates with me even more. Remember about maybe 3 years ago, I physically had to move my family from the place where I was living because one of our neighbors was constantly harassing us, saying that one of my kids was making a lot of noise for them. I was like, really, what kind of noise can a 2-year-old really be making? Because she just didn't expect a black couple living in the same place where she lived. So she would constantly knock on my door. I had to take even the matter to police, report her to police and all that kind of stuff. But then it became to a point where it was just too much for me. We had to basically move out of that place. So
You
I
had
think,
to move.
yes, I think it's not just about police. I think it's how some of these people that we work with, who are our neighbors, who we sit and interact with, look at us. I don't think they value us as a people, as a community.
I think, Paul, it comes from the history of the founding of this great nation called the United States of America. At its inception, when the Constitution was put together, it pretty much gave all the rights for white people. But when it came to black people, they were considered to be property, not people. And when it came to the indigenous people, it didn't really very much accommodate them. So it didn't matter whether a white person had immigrated from Europe a year earlier. That particular individual had almost as a right of birth constitutional rights. But when it comes to people who look like you and me, for some reason, the constitutional rights seem to remain elusive. And that is not to say, frankly, Paul, that we have not really seen a lot of improvements. Because, let's face it, this country in fact, is a country that I do not characterize as the most racist country on this planet Earth. Rather, I look at it, in fact, as the most racial conscious country on this planet Earth. And the evidence is there, because let's face it, we have actually had an 80 years tenure of an African American president, Barack Hussein Obama Jr. And that President Barack Hussein Obama Jr. was elected not only by black people, not only by the brown people, not only by the indigenous people, but by millions and millions of young white people who happen to be American citizens. We have also had, for example, great black astronauts. We have had great black super professors, great black super lawyers, great black super doctors with real clinics, Paul,
Right.
not like me. So there have been some very significant improvements. But you know, as Barack Obama once said, this union is not perfect. It needs a lot of work to be done in order to really accommodate every human being in a manner that is humane. I think that still remains elusive for as long as you are black, and especially you come into contact with the police establishment.
You know, when I first moved to this country, maybe about 20 years ago, you are one of those people who told me that, Paul, if you're going to succeed in this country as a black young man, there are things you need to do and do them very well. One, if you have to do anything, you have to be the best at what you do. Secondly, you have to jump 3 times higher. I've tried to do all that. And I'm sure every black person out there tries to do simple basic things. When police stops you, you comply. You do whatever they tell you to do. But sometimes it's not enough. What can we, as people in the media, maybe do to enlighten or to educate people who are stuck in the past?
We need to continue educating people. We need to continue exposing the wrong. And we need to continue the conversation. And I still remain of the same view, Paul, as I told you many, many, many years ago before you came to the United States. I'm glad you did, and I'm glad this country was generous enough to allow you to become one of its own. You are now a legitimate citizen of the United States. You, in fact, have a vote. I should remind you to make sure that you do your thing in November, because, in fact, you have a right to choose who should be your next president. You have a right to choose who should be your next senator.
Right.
You have a right to choose who should be your next congresswoman or congressman. So as much as there are a lot of problems in this country, there are also great things that I think we should be proud of. I think that the kind of difficult terrain that as a black man you have to negotiate in this particular country, I have found out at the end of the day that in fact there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, I find that I become a very, very competent, confident, a very smart individual at what I do. Because for whatever I do, Paul, I make sure that I avoid or stay away, if I can, from the margin of error.
And I think borrowing from your statement right there, I think I try to do much to be the best that I can be, and I strive to do that on every single day, every single assignment. I look at it from the perspective of I'm still a black person. If I need to succeed, I need to do it even better than the people who have done it before me. I challenge myself every single time. But to some degree, you think it's not enough. I mean, for example, the lady in New York, this person is minding his business, walking in Central Park. This is an open place where everybody is walking. Same, this lady, a professional person who works for one of these financial institutions, calls police on a black man. What is it that, as black people, what is it that we have done really to deserve this kind of treatment from our fellow Americans?
She probably happens to have a false sense of who she is. Again, she probably looks back at the history of the formation of this great country and looks at herself as a legitimate human being who has the constitutional rights. Others might in fact call them inalienable rights, or even birthrights for that matter. And she looks at this black man, this cousin of ours. She looks at him and she doesn't see a citizen like herself. She sees a subject, as per the other pundit that I mentioned earlier. And therefore, she thinks that she has the protection, almost basically a right of being protected by the institution of the police from this particular individual who obviously she thinks does not have any constitutional rights, is a subject because, mind you, that important document at one time had characterized people who looked like you and me as a piece of property. Even though there have been so many changes, mind you, you cannot, it is said, legislate attitudes and mindsets. Those have to undergo fundamental changes, really. And in order for those things to happen, it is up to the media. It is up to the educational curriculum of this great country. It is up to our leaders, whether they be political, whether they be religious leaders, civic leaders. It is really all of us. Each of us, I think, is in this together. And I think that is the reason why you said that you try to be the best that you could be, but you still feel like you really haven't done enough. I can assure you, you should continue doing that because I think, given my experience, you may very well be on the right path. This is a country where I found that if you are actually a black man or a black woman, good may not be good enough for you. You have to be the best in order for the dominant culture to consider or perceive you to be on the same page.
Now, let's go to a comment here from Nicole Johnson. She says, Dr. Shaka, I respect your views on so many things, and I'm just curious. I'm a single mother raising two sons. What should I tell my sons when they walk out as a black woman? What should I tell my sons when they walk out of the door? Because I'm always worried that something might happen to my two children. Your thoughts on that, Shaka?
Nicole, that is a very interesting question. I think, Nicole, you have to continue assuring and reassuring your children that they are the best specimen of humanity. You have to continue encouraging them. You have to continue encouraging your children that they should be the best that they can be. And if they can be the best they can be, you can be assured, Nicole, that your children will be ready for prime time. They will be ready to compete globally and be the best that they can be, just like we have had a Michael Jordan, just like we have had the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., just like we had Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. We have had people like George Padmore, Paul Robeson. We have had incredible people. We have had incredible people, men and women of integrity. Make sure that your children develop character and have integrity, because those two qualities can, in fact, take them places. I can assure you of that, Nicole. And make sure that your children are very well behaved. They are disciplined. When they identify what they want, they can focus like a laser beam. No one can take away anything from you if you have acquired it. And I'm talking about knowledge here. Once you get knowledge, once you get information under your medulla oblongata, no one can take it away from you, Nicole. As a matter of fact, I have news for you. That is the only thing, sincerely, that you could actually consider as something you own, and nobody, not a state, not the Supreme Court of any country, not the National Assembly or House of Representatives or Congress or Senate, not the White House or any state house or any monarchy that has a queen or a king can take away your knowledge. But if you're talking about a house, a mansion, if you are talking about a Cadillac, a Mercedes, a Lexus, if you are talking about deep pockets, a Swiss bank account, those are game, but not knowledge, not character, not integrity.
Yeah, let's go to Okita Samuel. Mr. Shaka, I was thinking about bringing my young boys to America for college, and I'm now wondering whether America is the right place to bring my children because they're young black men, and watching news coming out of America, it's scary for a young black man. What kind of advice would you give me?
First of all, that is also an interesting question, Samuel. I wish I would know where you are talking from or where you are calling from. First of all, there is a saying that charity begins at home. First of all, make sure that your child gets the best of whatever is available where you are. Make sure that your child is very proud, very confident enough, steeped in his or her own culture. Make sure that your child is ready for prime time. Make sure that your child respects the qualities, the values of character and integrity, discipline. Once those things are gotten, then your child can succeed anywhere, whether it is in the United States of America, whether it is in Australia. No matter where that particular child goes, they will succeed. Look at us, for example, Samuel. I, for one, grew up in a small southwestern town of Kavale in Uganda. And I came here about 44 years ago. And you know what? I can tell you that no matter what happens in this country, no matter how the police treat people who look like me, I know that that is a behavioral trait. It is something that can in fact be changed. Because what is interesting about society, Samuel, is that society, fortunately, is not static. It is dynamic. And people also, as such, are they are basically not static. They are dynamic. I can assure you that no matter what happens, I, Shaka Sali, I shall always owe a huge, profound debt of gratitude to the American people, the American taxpayer, who was able to allow me to have unfettered access to the educational, intellectual infrastructure of this great country that has, in a sense, revolutionized me in terms of how I look at myself vis-a-vis the world. I think that you can still be the best that you can be in this country. I think this is still a great country that has great opportunities for you. If you are willing to work very hard, if you are willing to be law-abiding, if you are willing to make sure that you are the best that you can be, America is still a great place. But at the end of the day, what I advise you and your colleagues is that we, as Africans, should make sure that we help develop that continent. We help develop Africa to make it the best that it can be, to make it competitive at least, so that our children can grow up proudly among their people, can grow up in a manner that helps them in terms of the way they look at their culture. Because at the end of the day, we are as equal human beings and as any other human beings, whether they come from North America, whether they come from Europe, whether they come from Asia or Latin America, we are all in this together. We all can be the best that we can be.
That's a perfect segue. Let's go to a comment from Nadom Waipu in Plateau State, Nigeria. Good day, Shaka. Do you think the leadership of African nations have learned a good lesson from this pandemic, especially the poor conditions in our healthcare and educational system, which is making us rely on other countries outside of the continent?
You know, I think that we are still really in a learning process. I don't think that our leaders have gotten it yet. And I think that we should be a little bit patient. But as far as I'm concerned, I strongly believe that the future of Africa, and I'm talking about the Africa with neither borders nor boundaries. I am talking about an Africa that is going to be transformed by the changing demographics in tandem with social media. You know, when I look at a person like me and my generation, I sometimes call myself a man who was born in BBC, born before computers. I know that Paul laughs at me all the time and
that's funny.
He kicks me left and right. But let's face it, we are the beneficiary of the Gutenberg factor.
The printing press.
At that time, we were king. Our generation is no longer king. And I think, to be very honest with you, it is high time that the current leaders hand over the baton willingly to the younger generation. I think the moment is now, especially when you look at this coronavirus pandemic. It is this young generation, it is these people who reflect the changing demographics, essentially who are even helping us stay afloat. When you talk about the developed countries, they have since at least February or March been operating on high tech. And guess who are the wizards, who are the geniuses of high tech technology? It is the Porundihos of the world. Certainly not the Shakasaris.
I'll take that as a compliment.
And why not?
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Ndugu Shaka Sali.
You're most welcome, my brother Paul.
Thank you to all our viewers.